Montreal was founded in 1534 by Jacques Cartier. He came over from France, and when he arrived, found the Iroquois Indians. Comparatively speaking to other conquests and, say, Christopher Columbus arriving, this was a very peaceful conquest. The Iroquois Indians accepted the French language and also accepted the French traditions. Every picture that you're going to see, except of course for the maps and the little mini photograph of Jacques Cartier, was taken by either us or largely Darby Biggert, who is sitting up there, our fantastic photographer extraordinaire. When Jacques Cartier did arrive, however, he was faced with the harsh climate and also the harsh reality that Montreal did not have as many natural resources to offer as did, say, Latin America. What he found, however, was furs and wood. Throughout Montreal's history, it's been a meeting place for people of different origins, language, traditions, religions, cultures, you name it. If it's some kind of an assembly, you can find it in Montreal. In the beginning, Montreal was really comprised of Aboriginal people, French and British people, and those people were later joined by Jewish, Slavic, and Italian immigrants. This intermingling of people has historically been a source of great conflict, but over the years, the people of Montreal have worked together and fantastic alliances have been formed.
So being that we were going north for our trip, we all expected that it would be cold. But it was just ironic that driving up to Montreal, when we were driving up, they were experiencing the worst snowstorm of the year. So we arrived to a few feet of snow with a few more on the way. During the winter, the average temperature is minus 10 degrees Celsius, but luckily we were prepared. Every time we left our hotel, we were bundled in vests, coats, layers of thermals, shirts, and pants. Me and Nicole even had a layering competition. Even though we didn't look as chic as the natives in our wool hats and gloves, we didn't let the weather keep us from experiencing this wonderful city.
As a double major in both French studies and history, I was particularly interested in the history of the city of Montreal itself. One of our day trips while we were in Canada was to McCord Museum, which examines the history of the city. So I did a little bit of research and found that in 1760, the Canadian territory was surrendered to the French by the Great Britain after their victory in the 7 Years' War. Under British imperialism, the city of Montreal flourished and became an industrial and cultural epicenter. During the second half of the 19th century, the rapid development of infrastructure, including the construction of railroads and canals, as well as the factory boom, incited an urban migration of French Canadians to the center of the city. With these links, Montreal secured its place in the world industrial market and was fondly regarded as the jewel in the British imperial crown.
One of the big crises that we ran into firsthand as language majors was the problem of bilingualism in Montreal. Now, as you guys probably already know, Canada is bilingual. Both French and English are the official languages of all of Canada, but for the province of Quebec, the official language is French. Now, this law and this ruling that French is the official language has not come very easily. The unrest really reached its turbulence in 1969, and shortly thereafter there was the passage of Bill 101, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But Montreal is defined as being a bilingual city, despite being located in the province of Quebec. That determines that the official language is French. Bill 101 has been a hugely controversial piece of legislation. The definition is up there in the bright red. It establishes that French is the sole official language of the entire province of Quebec, which differentiates it from the rest of Canada. Bill 101 establishes several fundamental rights, but most notably, we talked about the fifth one that's listed there, the right of persons eligible for instruction in Quebec to receive the instruction in French. That means that even if someone goes to McGill University, which is a huge English-speaking university in Montreal that we visited, they have the right to receive they have the right to take their exams and also turn in all of their papers in French, even if they're receiving instruction in English.
Walking around the streets of Montreal, we were all shocked by how many churches we saw. In fact, Mark Twain once said, "This is the first time I was ever in a city where you couldn't throw a brick without breaking a church window." In Old Montreal, we saw Notre Dame de Montreal, which is modeled after Notre Dame in Paris, and that's to the left. But one of our most memorable day trips was our trip to St. Joseph's Oratory, and that's on the right. The oratory is on the northern slope of Mount Royal. At the oratory, we were able to see Brother Andre's heart. It was on display and encased in glass. Brother Andre was supposedly a healer, and it was really great to see, to go into the tomb because we got to see all of the crutches from all of the cripples he supposedly cured and healed.
As part of our coursework back at Wagner, we examined literature, film, and poetry, specifically from the city of Montreal. We first started with Émile Nelligan, who is considered the father of Quebecois poetry. Around the turn of the century, he was looking at the European symbolist movement, and his poetry reflects urban realities and the anxiety of both the interior and exterior alienation of it in a changing world. His poems depicted emotional extremes, from pain all the way to disappointment, and his poetry concludes that in the end, emotions will trump all else. He was first published at age 16, and his short-lived literary career came to a halt in 1899 when he was admitted to a psychiatric asylum after he had a breakdown. 4 years later, his collected poems were published by his mother in a book called Le Récital des Anges, which received critical acclaim in Canada that he never knew.
Okay, not only were we the only UIH trip to travel north, but we were also the only UIH trip to drive to our destination. In the bottom right-hand corner is the minivan that we drove to Montreal, and we spent many hours driving around the city there and back. And one night we, as a group, went to the movies. We saw J'ai tué ma mère, which translates into I killed my mother. It was written and directed by Xavier Dolan, who's actually 18 years old, so it was really impressive to see what he accomplished. It's a semi-autobiographical film. It's about the teenage boy, and he rebels against his mother in his quest for independence, so it was really interesting. And also Montreal, going to the movies is a really popular pastime because of the frigid weather. It's a great place to go inside, stay warm. The movies in Quebec is government sponsored, so it's not very prosperous. We only paid $3 to go to the movies. And in Quebec, the citizens really see going to the movies as more of a right than as a privilege. Back in Staten Island, in our class time together, we also watched many Quebecois films, including The Barbarian Invasions and Jesus of Montreal. And both of these films focus mainly on family relationships and religion, which are both really popular themes in Quebecois film.
One of the things that we all noticed is how the cultural influences of Montreal were married in the most unique way. And personally, one of my favorite ways we got to see this was in the food. We ate really well. One of the first meals I had was a crepe dish named the Quebecoise. It was a crepe stuffed with Swiss cheese and ham covered in maple syrup. And although it sounds a little strange, it was delicious. We also went to several cafes and enjoyed traditional French pastries and some great cups of coffee. Our last meal, however, was by far my favorite. We ate at L'Entrecôte. Each of us thoroughly enjoyed our 4-course meals. The only thing that was better than the meal was the conversation that followed it. We sat there for at least 3 hours reminiscing about our trip and enjoying each other's company. It was a great way to end our amazing trip to the north.
This is a photo from one of our last days in Montreal. It's of the entire group that was on the trip. We spent the day ice skating on the top of Mount Royal. For us, we were only a 7-hour drive away, but it felt like we were worlds away from New York. It was a great experience, and it really gave us a good opportunity to immerse ourselves in not only the French language, but in a French culture.
Nicole, do you want to introduce the professors that took you on the trip?
Oh, absolutely. We traveled to Montreal with Dr. Urbank from the Modern Languages Department. She's a native of Montreal. Also with Darby Biggert and Jake Brown were the other chaperones.